Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Barnes.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Mark, the first question this week is from Shell. She has a young horse who she would like to know how she can help accept being caught and have his halter put on. She's got a yearling who's very friendly unless he sees her with the halter and the lead rope.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's some things that they know what they like and they know what they don't like. It's interesting that the halter and lead rope bothers him though, because if he hasn't quite got to the stage that you've been putting a halter on and leading him, then obviously he just sees it as a bit of a threat or something. Or but either way, it's something that needs to be rectified. So there's the interesting thing about young horses is you go out, like when we handle our foals, it's the same as you go out and it's kind of like touch and go. They're quite curious and interested when they're young, so they're going to come up and sniff, and if the mares are kind of quite friendly, then obviously they're going to come up and be quite curious. And the thing I sort of say, encourage to everyone, is touch and go. Before they lose interest, you walk away. So when you get to a stage, it sounds like your horse is quite friendly with you, but then concerned about the halter. So education has to come into play at some stage. So you've heard of possibly, or if you haven't heard of it, it's called approach and retreat. Approach and retreat is something that is almost like you listening to your horse's bubble and approaching till there's signs of concern. Either just a little hardening in expression or a little nervousness through your horse or anything like that, and then you would stop and sort of notice that and step back a little, give your horse space to adjust and not feel too pressured, so it's got time to think, and then that's a way you obviously get up to a horse to touch it and anything like that. But by the sounds of it, even using approach and retreat, you get there and the horse will go, hang on, but you've got a halter in your hand, so I'm not really buying into that. I'm out of here. So approach and retreat is a good listening technique when you first put a hand on a horse and things like that. But it's basically, approach and retreat is you doing all the changes to help reduce the horse's anxiety. The horse is not really making a lot of changes, or so in an educational purpose, the horse is not really learning something new. It just realises that you're listening to it. So what I would say in regarding the halter and walking in with your horse is, when you're walking with your horse, when you see your horse sort of look away or think away because it's seen you with a halter, and you have to do this in a fairly, not a super confined space, but a confined enough space that you can control the environment just a little more on your horse, so you get a better response sooner. And this is the exact same sort of principle that I would use with horses that have been really traumatised, and they're sort of carrying a lot of anxiety during the catch. So some horses are just really frightened when you catch them, but then you finally put the halter on and you step back and they relax and they kind of maybe have a bit of a lick and a chew and a bit of a letdown, because that anticipation of the catch was so horrific for them in a sense, because they have had a bad past with people. It's kind of a similar thing. So basically you're drawing the horse into the catch a little. So when you see your little horse look away or get a little bit sort of like, oh, you've got the halter, then you do something to get their attention. So you might sort of maybe go, a pop on your leg with your hand. It might make a little clapping sound, or if you've got the poppers of the lead rope, you just pop on your leg, and you'll see the horse's thoughts come back, and then you'll just step back and reward them for that change. And what I would most definitely do is I walk out with the halter in my hand, clear view, so the horse can really see what's coming. So I walk and I have that in front of me, like, I want you to catch the halter. I don't want you to catch me. This is not a relationship thing so much. It's, I want you to bring your thoughts to me carrying this halter and engage with this halter that I'm going to put on you. So you walk up with the halter. As soon as you see the horse's thoughts kind of start to look away, or then you will sort of get the focus back with a distraction, and step away a little to let the horse think about that, and then you approach again. As soon as you see the thoughts go away again, you get your horse's attention until, it's like one of those, what I say is if a horse's thoughts is on something for long enough, it's obviously going to move its feet there. But every time the horse willingly engages with you and the halter, walking up with that halter on your hand, then basically that willing engagement, you would step back and reward the horse for that willing engagement and say, I'll take, because obviously approaching with the halter creates a little bit of nervous pressure on your horse, so stepping back will reward it a little. So any engagement that the horse chooses with you and the halter, step back and reward it. Anytime the horse looks away, just get its attention, and until you get to a stage that you walk up, the horse will engage with the halter, sniff it, and then as soon as it sniffs it, you walk away, give it some space, and then come back again. You could do 2 or 3 lessons in the one sort of half an hour time by going away and coming back again until you can put the halter all around its face, or the rope or whatever you're carrying around its face and around over its neck. And then probably the next thing I'd do is just put a long rope over its neck and just put a sort of a half loop in it, not a loop that goes around its neck, just folded in half, so you've got 2 ends of the rope, a long rope that you can stand at a distance and just start to put a little yield on your horse there, draw a little pressure, and the horse will start to yield its thoughts and feed in towards you because you're pulling the pressure towards you at a distance. And then the horse gets comfortable with that yield, and then you go back with the halter again and start sort of preparing it for the halter. But you could lead it around with a neck rope for a little while until it's soft with that. And if the yard's small enough, the desire to really shoot off and go a long way away is not there. So your horse will sort of have its thoughts a little bit more contained in that environment. But if you work through those things, generally, you can get a horse pretty engaged and focused in the catch, opposed to just, as I said earlier, approach and retreat, whereas this is actually getting your horse to do something. So it's actually to release or to help its anxiety. It's actually doing something to make itself feel better instead of you doing all the approach and retreat.
Yeah, because I've seen you go up to a horse and put a halter on it, or rub the horse's neck with the halter, and then put it on, and then take the halter straight off. You don't just go, right, halter, now we're going to do some work. You actually just, that was it, wasn't it? Yeah, it's almost like, so like I said earlier, for the traumatised horses or the ones that have been beaten by people and, the rescue horses and stuff like that, is some of them are so frightened of the catch that you just quickly catch them and take the halter off and walk away, and they go, oh, that was it, is that all done? And then next time the catch is a lot quicker. The quicker the catch is for some horses, the better it can be. I'm not saying that for all horses, but I've seen long, lingering catches where the people have been really sort of connected to every thought change in their horse and emotional change. And I've been standing there watching, and I sort of watching half an hour later, the horse is still kind of going, I'm still scared of this catch because it's this long, lingering catch. And sometimes I've had to step in and say, hey, I'm gonna sort of get your horse to pay attention to me for a second, put a hand on it and walk away, and then within about sort of 4 or 5 of those quick catches, you can walk up to the horse in a hurry, put a halter on, and there's not this long lingering anxiety. Because the amount of pressure they can cope with, that you've got to, that's what you're watching, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, Shell, there's a video on catching a wary Arab on the membership that may be useful for you. And just staying with this sort of idea of catching a horse and that first initial work, I've got a question from Monica. So she's got a young yearling, and she is actually quite an outgoing and very connected mare, quite the opposite to the one that Shell's got. So she can put a halter on, and she expresses her own opinion quite strongly, but she's pulling back. So she says, what do I do? I've been using the rope around her neck. She waits until she connects with her, and then she asks her, but she's really at a loss if she pulls back when she gets to the stage when she's got the halter on. And she also just says, is there a video? I'll point you to some videos in the end, but we'll just listen to what Mark has to say about that first.
It's basically, and in the videos you see me sort of working our youngsters. They're interested and they start to follow a feel, and there's not a lot of pulling back there because they find their boundaries, and by setting the boundaries in the right way, the horse doesn't feel overly threatened by them, so they don't have a panic pullback. But there are horses that are just like, oh, right, I'm not interested anymore, I'm going to walk off. And then all of a sudden they're going to hit a boundary, and that will create sometimes a big or a mini pullback, or sometimes a big pullback, or a bit of a panic. So whatever attachment you got on the horse, if it's the halter or a neck rope or something like that, in your case it sounds like the halter, basically it's very easy to set certain boundaries that don't fully restrict your horse. If you just put a full restriction on them, then you can create a panic and a pullback in a horse worse than you need, and also set it up to be frightened of pressure. So, you remember the old sort of, you put a rope on a horse and pull it around to face up, all that sort of stuff. That would most commonly put brace in a lot of horses. They'd brace, and they brace through their whole body to rope pressure. So I strongly advise against that sort of stuff. But what I do like is horses to find a boundary and figure out the path of least resistance. So it's okay to create resistance. So say, for instance, if your horse sees the other horses and walks off and says, I'm going to tap out. So their thoughts are either kind of coming with you in the rope, or they're in the opposite direction. So basically you've got to let the thoughts go in the opposite direction. You have a certain droop in your rope, and your horse will walk off, and it'll kind of get to a boundary, but don't set and trap the boundary, as in say set on it and panic your horse. Just let it find a boundary. And something I do with horses that I don't want to create a lot of brace in, but I do want to show them that that's not available, so they eventually choose a better pathway, as I say, the path of least resistance, is I might just, as the horse takes up a feel, I'll take up that same feel, and I'll just pull a feel, and then I'll loosen it, and I'll get my other hand and just pull a feel, almost like I'm sort of pulling the rope, like I'm going to pull the horse in, but I'm actually not pulling the horse in. I'm just putting a feel on it, and then I loosen it and put a feel on it, and then I loosen it, and have yourself in a, I would say in another sense, like the last question is, have yourself in a yard that the horse doesn't feel like it can run all the way away. So in a lot of cases when I want to avoid a big pullback, but also teach a horse not to fight boundaries, is I want the yard size to be big enough that I don't have to move my feet a long way with my horse, so basically the fence can catch the horse in an emergency before I have to catch the horse with the rope and it runs off. So have a small enough yard that your rope's long enough that you can sort of, or your halter lead rope's long enough that the horse can be caught by the fence, that it doesn't pull the rope out of your hands. And if worst case scenario happens, you let the horse turn around the opposite way, flip the rope over its back, and continue with that sort of massaging feel of the rope. So you just put a feel in it, and you loosen that feel, put a feel in it. So it's a continual feel of a boundary pulsing on the horse until it goes, well, that's not working. And as soon as its thoughts come towards you, you release and say thank you. And then obviously where the thoughts, if the thoughts are staying somewhere long enough, then the feet will eventually follow. If your horse thinks away, moves its feet into that boundary, then basically you do that pulsing boundary where you just pull and release and pull and release. You can do it with one hand if you want, but sometimes just pulling a rope with one hand and swapping to the other in this just rhythmic motion gets them to go, oh, that's kind of like something out there that's pulsating that I don't really want to be out there in that pulsating feeling. I might try this. And then when they try that path of least resistance, that's when you reward. And that's sort of sometimes better on a young horse than a full-on static boundary that just feels like that they've been trapped by that holder. So basically, in that respect, they're finding pressure and they're finding their own release. You're not actually pulling towards them, pulling towards yourself and trying to drag them towards you. That would put a lot of brace in your horse and more fear of the rope. So it's like as they're pushing, they're feeling that pulsing. As they're releasing, they're feeling the release. And soon enough, they'll come around because they're not going to, a horse is always going to find the path of least resistance. They're not going to just, unless they've really shut down and full on, blocking out, and they just block out to everything and shell up, they're always going to search for that easiest pathway, and sure enough, they'll find it pretty quick.
So, Monica, just to direct you to some videos that you asked for, there's videos, if you do a search on pull, it'll come up with fixing the pullback version 1 and 2. So Mark put on 2 different videos, 2 different scenarios of how you could fix a pullback. They are with an older horse, but it's all on the ground, so that gives you 2 ideas. And helping a mare with a bad pullback to lead better. I think you'll get some good concepts on that too.
The thing about the pullback videos, these are horses that have pulled back. Some of them often flipped over and stuff like that. So they're horses that have never been taught how to lead properly, never understood pressure, always braced and have been frozen pressure or reacted through rearing. But in these videos, you'll see the kind of more extreme scenarios that how your young horse could end up if it's not addressed properly. And you to use those videos, you'll see me using pressure where the horse finds a boundary and then moves off. You can use those concepts with your young horses, but you probably only just got to tone some of it down a little bit and do it as more of an educational lesson. So your horse will find a boundary because it's searching. You'll present a boundary. It'll find release. So there are principles in those videos that you use, but you're not going to treat that particular video and do it exactly the same because of the, but there are lots of things that you'll see be a big advantage, like, some of the pulling back horses. It's important that they learn to back up softly as well, but your horse needs to learn to back up and lead and things like that. So, but you'll use those videos to take the certain things out of it that you'll need, but just don't do it exactly how I do it with those horses.
And with the leading, because that's just as an important part of it, isn't it? I remember you often saying, as soon as a horse braces, you'll say, that's a pullback, when you're teaching them to lead. So you can see from the beginning what you're ironing out the creases right from the beginning of their education. So
this is something I guess it's taken me, I sometimes say, wow, that horse person knows more about horses than I know. I'm still on trying to figure out the reins and leading, and there's so sometimes we can get caught up in so many different things and so many different ideas that help our horsemanship that we only take a little bit of each one, but there's so much stuff that we're not actually looking at the depth of each individual piece of the puzzle. So leading, to me, I'm still learning about leading, and what's so important, and the biggest problem I see in all training, all the horses that come to me through training, the problems that they've, I guess that's happened over the years is leading and reins are still putting a stop and a brace in a horse, and there's a saying that I say to everybody, and it's reins are for movement, so is leading. Leading is reins, they're all the same, and it's for movement, it's not for stopping. And a lot of times we think we put a stop on a horse with the lead rope, we put a stop on a horse with the reins. If we put a stop in that lead rope and we put a stop in those reins in our mind, then we're going to put a brace in our horse in the long term. So how a horse doesn't pull back is when it feels pressure, it moves. The whole idea and philosophy of picking up the feel of a lead rope or rein is so the horse shifts its thoughts in preparation to shift its body, but it's always to create movement, never to create stillness. So that's why I don't teach lateral flexion, that where people just bend their horses around all the time, because it's creating stillness in the horse's feet, not movement. And that principle in itself will, that reins create movement, lead ropes create movement, will fix a lot of your braces, a lot of the things that you ride with legs that you shouldn't, a lot of the problems you're trying to fix with legs, all that sort of stuff, it'll line out a lot of those.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. You can learn more from Mark online through his online training videos. Just search Mark Langley Horsemanship. There's over 380 training videos which everyone has access to with a 7-day free trial. If you like what you see, it's just $15 a month from there. That's help where you need it.